Morning. We're gonna wait maybe like 1 more minute, and I know not everyone is here yet, and people might still be trickling in, but first part is kind of our general, typical intros to the process, so that's a good time for people to kind of slowly come in for that. Good morning, John.
Morning.
Good to have you here. Hi, Nikita.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. You know, I'm pretty great.
Oh, I
You
love
know,
that.
just from a personal standpoint, I'm great.
Love that.
Okay, I think we should get started, even though we're still waiting for some folks to trickle in, and that's okay. The first little part of this is just some of the housekeeping. So I think we'll be okay and let people come in as that's happening. So Edith, if you wouldn't mind starting to share your screen. All right, good morning, everyone, officially, and welcome to our final breakout discussion as the Environmental Justice and Equity Working Group for the Oregon Energy Strategy. I'm Lauren Rosenstein, my pronouns are she and they, and I am the Strategic Engagement Analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy. Today, we're joined by Mary Capriva, who's Odo's, which is the Oregon Department of Energy, Odo's economist, Ruchi Sidir, who's the Associate Director for the Strategic Engagement. Ruchi's going to be helping us today to monitor the chat, to let us know when there's a hand raised, and going to help out with some prompting questions so we can really dig in along the way. Edith Bear is managing our slides today and managing this project. Stacy Heiberger is here for technical support, and Hugh Arsenault is on the drums. Just kidding, just kidding. He's available. He's doing the notes. That will be available later on the website. I really felt like I was introducing a band, a full band today. All right, we've got a really full agenda. Let's dive in. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as a reminder, this is Odo's mission that we want to uphold during our time together. The Oregon Department of Energy helps Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable, clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. Next slide. So here's a reminder of how to use WebEx. If you're a panelist, you can add to the comments and questions to the chat. You can also use the tiny little hand raised function at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to use emojis to signal agreement with other people, though if you disagree, I would love more engagement than an emoji. If you're on your phone and you want to come off of mute, you'll use *6. And if you're having any technical issues, please message Stacy. If your chat isn't working, go ahead and come off mute so we can help. And if that doesn't work, please email Joshua Price, who's been included in all the emails that I've sent out. Next slide. As a working group, we're here to elevate the concerns, barriers, solutions, and areas of interest within the field of environmental justice and equity to support the development of policy recommendations for the Oregon Energy Strategy. Next slide. To meet our purpose today, these are our objectives. We're going to review the environmental justice and policy working group process to date. We're going to discuss potential actions for the other working groups, policy actions, And we're going to develop a draft framework for equitable and environmental justice policy processes within the energy sector. Next slide. So as you can see, this is a super full schedule. I'm going to do my best to keep us on time. I can just about guarantee that we're not going to get to every conversation we want to have today. And I'm going to plug the comment portal a few different times, but that's going to be a really great tool to use in case we can't get to the conversation you want to have. Next slide. Here are all of our working group members, and I really can't thank everyone enough for sharing your time, experiences, and expertise with us during this process. It's really made for a meaningful, full engagement. Thank you. Next slide. Here's our group agreements to ensure we're creating a space for people to feel brave and share their thoughts and concerns and questions. These are the same agreements we utilized in the previous phase 1 meetings and throughout phase 2. I'll add there's an agreement here that says be conscious of speaking time. And I've added be brave so that if you notice you're not speaking but you want to say something, please be brave and speak up because your perspective really matters in this process. If you're someone who likes to fill silence, I encourage you to just give it a beat and see if someone who hasn't spoken will step into that space. Also, I'm adding today that, again, it's a full schedule and it's a long meeting. So if you need to pop away for a second to get water, a snack, take a bio break, please do. Please take care of yourself and your needs. I always encourage you to come on camera as you're able. And if anyone thinks there's something missing from the group agreements, please do add it to the chat. Next slide. All right, we're going to use the chat for introductions today. And my intro question is really selfish. I'm looking for tips always. We've all got to take care of ourselves these days, and I really hope you are. So in the chat, could you please share your name, your affiliation, your pronouns if you're comfortable sharing them, and what are you doing to relax these days? I'll just pause a moment while people fill in that chat. And I'm also noticing we've been joined by some other folks. So good morning, Alma. Good morning, Christina. Hi there, Hannah. Hi, Sylvia. To relax, exactly. Open to suggestions. We're all gonna glean from this chat prompt and really try to take it in and do a little self-care. Happy to have everyone participate in this welcome and question. And lavender anything, very helpful in those moments when you need to just take a moment. Oh, Caleb, a 3-month-old puppy is so much work and fun, relaxing, and stressful. Yes, agree. John, love it. Let's get outside, bike riding in the sun. Forest Park. Oh, I was just there this weekend. It's like the very last of the trilliums in Forest Park. They're all so pretty. Hannah's also enjoying flowers on walks. Dancing, always dancing. Thanks, Alma. Yeah, watch season 2, it's a good time to like unwind with a favorite show. Blasting music, love it. Lots of music and dancing and movement. It's such an important way to take care of ourselves, I think. Breathing exercises, Sylvia, totally. Ooh, Hugh's over here drawing elaborate maps for the D&D group. I will be following up with you later. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate hearing about that. Let's go to our next slide. And actually, you can just go straight to the next one. So here we are, we're at meeting 4 and our final group conversation to discuss draft policy actions that have been crafted across working groups. Next slide. This is the scope for each of the working groups. And as a reminder, there are other ways people are contributing to the conversation through the advisory group, the interagency group, public listening sessions, and the comment portal. And we're taking in all of this feedback to read and consider and think about. Next slide. Here's our timeline. So the Oregon Energy Strategy is due November 1st, 2025. And our focus is near term, but not right now. It's likely that any policy recommendations will be aimed at the next long session in 2027. So we really want to consider what's in place now and also be mindful of what ongoing work is underway that might change the landscape between now and 2027 or 2028. We don't want to just duplicate ongoing work streams. Next slide. So here's a little about how we envision that final report will be structured. We're looking at this as at varying levels of recommendations, with each adding more specificity and action than the last. At the highest level, we have our strategies, and these strategies are largely delineated by topic areas that made up our 5 working groups. The strategies are directional and are meant to tell us where as a state we need to go. They do not set quantitative targets or define specific pace or scale. So just remember, this isn't a plan, it's a strategy to guide state action. And throughout all of these pathways, we're going to work to embed equity and justice principles. Next slide. Here's a conceptual view of how we envision framing policies in the final report. You can see strategies on the top line. And then under each strategy are high-level policy recommendations. And under those recommendations are our policy actions, which are actionable and measurable. And these policy actions generally fall into one of 3 categories: a new policy or program, a revision to an existing policy or program, or an area that needs further data or study. And I'm going to give you a quick example from the Transportation Electrification Group of what this could look like. Next slide. So here's an example from the Transportation Electrification Group where you can see each level of recommendation. At the top, we have our strategy of transportation electrification and vehicle miles traveled reduction. Below that is our high-level policy recommendation. It is reduce barriers to transportation electrification to ensure the state electrifies at the pace and scale needed to meet climate goals. And then underneath are our more actionable policy actions. So for this example, they took the policy action, establish a sustainable source of state funding to support the rapid deployment of charging and fueling infrastructure statewide. Again, the policy actions are our focus today, and just a reminder that these should be actionable, measurable, and we want to really focus on the near term, which is about the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide. So I'm going to spend the briefest of moments on our complementary analysis. On April 16th, ODO held a public information session where the consultants provided results on the air quality and energy wallet analysis. And they also shared insights on what to expect from the forthcoming jobs analysis. Next slide. The analysis had some key takeaways. They're listed here. I encourage you to read through this later. The slides are posted on the website, and watch the recording, which is also posted on the website if you haven't seen the presentation yet for more information. Next slide. So a little bit about what we've heard in our group. Next slide. So with the Environmental Justice and Equity Group, we're really noticing there are 2 approaches that have risen to the surface. There's both ways to embed the justice and equity principles we're hearing, as well as utilize them as an umbrella to use as a practice or a framework when energy policies are being developed, adopted, and put into practice. The umbrella environmental justice and equity concepts are what we are going to focus on in the last hour of time, Right now, we're just going to think about how to embed equity and justice principles and actions into the draft actions we have seen in the other working groups. Now, to ground our process, I want to walk us through the big headings and ideas we've seen in our conversations. We can go to the next slide. So this is the matrix that we're going to focus on at the end of our conversation for the last hour. But right now, I just want to focus us on the big headings. Originally, these big headings were affordability, access, workforce, education resources, tools, and uncategorized. And since then, Mary and I have worked to create a more actionable heading. And then, we relied on the strategies y'all put into the stickies and mirror board exercises last time and what we heard through the conversations to develop these strategies. Again, going to get to that later. Okay, so I'm going to read through these big headings and take them in so that we can consider them and embed them into the policy action conversations that we're about to dive into. So the first one is equitable access to decision-making processes. The next one is equitable access to infrastructure development. Then invest in long-term incentive programs for environmental justice communities. Next slide. Promote holistic workforce development in underserved communities. Then develop partnerships and resources in environmental justice communities. And finally, consider the intersection of ecosystems. Next slide. So now we're going to keep those big headings and all of the work that you've done leading up to this point in mind to begin discussing the draft policy actions that have been created in the other working groups to provide feedback on how to embed a justice and equity lens. I'm going to preface this again by saying there is no way we're going to get to all of the conversations we may want to have today. So I really encourage you to take notes as we go along and use the comment portal to share your thoughts, concerns, agreement, and disagreement with us. If you have clarifying questions, I encourage you to add them to the chat as we go along. And if it comes up later, you can always email me to get clarification before you add to the comment portal. Next slide. All right, here we go. Because there's so much to talk about today, we're going to set some prioritization for the conversation using the FIST or 0 to 5 method. I'm going to walk us through the draft actions, and then we're going to use a Menti poll to see where the group would like to focus the discussion. You'll note in the Menti by clicking on the number that reflects if you want to spend some time talking about a particular draft action. And we aren't comparing one draft action to the other. It's just, does this particular draft action need attention, do you think? Do you want to have a conversation about this one today? So if you think this idea does not work for me and we should discuss it, you're going to choose 0. If you think I see major issues with this idea and we should discuss it, choose 1. If you think I see minor issues with this idea and we should discuss it, choose 2. If you think I see minor issues we can address in written comments, choose 3. If you think I do not have any concerns that I want to discuss today, choose 4. And if you think I like this idea as drafted, choose 5. So we're going to prioritize conversations that get a 0, 1, and 2. The way I'm thinking about it is that if there's an action that has 1 0 but 4 2s, we'll talk about the 2s first. I want to make sure before we move on that this makes sense for everyone. If there's any clarifying questions about this process, or if you disagree with the way that I'm proposing we set that prioritization, you can either raise your hand or add it to the chat, or just come off mute and say if you have something.
I'll just say something that helped me when Lauren explained this to me, which is that you're not voting on the policy action, you're just trying to help us understand what you want to discuss. So it's kind of like, oh, I want to engage in some more discussion on this because I think there might be some changes or details or something that I want to like chat about with everyone else. And so that's like what would, if it were me picking one of these options, that's kind of what I would be thinking about, I think, when picking a number. Is that right, Lauren?
Yep, that's right. Okay, so I'm gonna have everyone now go to menti.com. I'm gonna put that in the chat so you know how to spell it. MENTI, menti.com. And then you'll need a code to access our Menti board. So Mary, can you add that and send that just to the panelists? And so now I want to add also that for folks who are listening in who are not part of the working group, you won't be able to participate in the Menti, but you will be able to see the results and listen in fully because we'll switch share screen here in just a moment. Okay, we can go to the next slide. We're going to kick it off with the building electrification group, and you'll see that some of these are highlighted, and those are actions that the other working group leads were interested in flagging as something they would love to have your feedback on. If it doesn't flag for you, that's also okay. You know, if it's just like no, I'm good with it, that's cool too. Okay, so we've got the Menti link in the chat. We've got the code. Can you see it, Zach, in the code in the chat? Mary Capriva just put it in. It's a series of numbers. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers. Can you see that?
You can just read it out loud too. It's 8,
Well,
9, 9,
so
1,
sorry.
1, 8. Oh, go ahead.
We're purposefully not reading it out loud so that only folks in the who are working group members can access it.
I'm so glad you interrupted me. Thank you.
But Zach, if you still can't see it, please do let me know. Zach cannot. Okay, hold on one second, Zach. I'm gonna message you.
Zach, I'll try messaging you directly with the code.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And if not, maybe we're just gonna have to say it out loud. Okay, while we're getting Zach set up.
Another thing, maybe I could reply to your email, Lauren, that you sent. And
yeah, that would be great.
So people who have access to their email can see it that way too.
That would be great. Thank you. And while we're getting Zach set up, let's go to the next slide. So this is, I sent you all the draft policy actions late last week, and we're actually going to switch from the PowerPoint to the Menti now. And Zach, if you still are unable to access the Menti, you can just put your number if you want to in the chat, and we can monitor it from there to make sure. Okay, Ruchi, can you, oh, good news, Zach got it. Thanks, Zach. Okay, good. I think we're ready, Ruchi, to switch over to our Menti.
Okay, great.
Happening. I'm gonna switch from my smoothie to my tea for this next portion. I came fully prepared for the 3 hours with 3 different types of liquids.
Can everyone see my screen?
Mm-hmm. Sure can. So this first one is support adoption of distributed energy resources to increase energy resilience, enable demand response programs, and provide grid services and financial benefits for utilities and customers. So if you are good with this and you don't want to discuss this today, you're going to put it as a 3, 4, or 5. If you want to discuss this today, you're going to put it in as a 0, 1, or 2. I'm gonna give it another second, then we're gonna move on. I think we're actually good to move on, Ruchi. Yeah,
How many people are in the working group right now online?
1, 2.
I see 10 responses so far. It's not showing me the participant list anymore now that I'm sharing.
10, 11, 12. There are 12 participants.
Okay, so there's maybe one person still thinking. Give them another second, I suppose.
And I think if you move on, Ruchi, too, it won't, I think that person will be able to stay if they want to.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay, this next one is, did this, also, if it doesn't move forward for you, please put into the chat to let me know. Okay, the next one is, conduct a study to assess the workforce implications of meeting Oregon's future energy needs with the goal of identifying opportunities for new job creation, assessing potential job displacement, and informing strategies to support and expand workforce development efforts to promote a just transition. So go ahead and add your 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And a reminder for folks who want to add to those written comments, we're going to keep on putting that comment portal into the chat throughout the meeting. And I'll also note that it could be, you know, that down the road, maybe you're discussing this with your organization, or you hear something from community members, and that might also prompt your wanting to add to the written comments, and that's really valuable for us. Okay, let's move to the next one, Ruchi.
Great. I should have also said, as Lauren's reading this and you have like a clarifying question, like I forgot what this means. This is like, you know, totally fine to ask. Make sure you know what this means before picking an option. But I think folks sound like they're familiar with them.
Yeah, you can just add
I
that.
one question.
Yeah.
So we're going off of just this like umbrella policy strategy that's on the Menti, not the like the PDFs that you sent with each, like with the policy actions.
The policy actions that were the PDFs that had the, they were in the like Word documents. Is that the one you're talking about, Nikita?
Yeah, yes, like I think they're like straw proposals.
Yeah, it's the same thing. The language might have changed a little bit from when I sent it out from straw proposal to draft policy action, but they're the same things.
Okay. But we're
Mhm.
basing our like vote off of what's written on this Menti.
Yes, you are deciding if you want to talk about this
Yeah.
particular issue today. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Nikita. All right, let's
I
move on. Oh,
Sorry, I have another quick question. This is Sylvia.
yeah.
It's been a bit since I skimmed through materials, but is the assumption that even if, equity outcomes or, the making sure that workforce, represents our community, yet this type of considerations are explicitly named, that because there's kind of that umbrella EJ framework that, they are implied in the language. And I think here, for example, just transition might cover my desire to see some of this underrepresented communities in the clean energy workforce idea. But
Yeah.
is the assumption that even if we don't see it, this umbrella language would cover it?
No, so Sylvia, I think you're bringing up a great point that maybe means that you're flagging that this is something that we need to talk about today to make it more specific and explicit.
I agree. Like, I mean, I was just thinking about this, like you all might say major issues, minor issues, but like maybe the question to ask is like, there's some details that I think we should clarify on understanding. We should discuss it more. Like, I think that would be a, a reason to pick number 2. Sylvia, like what you were just saying, I think maybe minor issue sounds like it's like a problem, but you're just flagging that it's maybe not a shared definition or understanding of what that means, which would, I think, be a good reason to discuss it more. What do you think, Lauren?
Yeah, I do. I think too, I wanna move us through this part of it also because there are quite a few draft policy actions that we want to get through to see where people's interest in discussing is. So I also think that if you have a question, that because maybe something is not clear in what's written, then that means Ruchi, I can see your WebEx, there you go. A 2 is a good thing to hit so that we do have the opportunity to talk about it and clarify. So I'm
Thank
gonna,
you.
yeah,
Put it to-
thank you. Okay.
Yay,
Okay.
I saw Sylvia change it to number 2. Thank you.
Let's move to that next one. Okay, establish a sustainable source of state funding to support the rapid deployment of charging and fueling infrastructure statewide. Oh, you know why I'm realizing, Ruchi, that these are different than maybe, I wonder, Nikita, if this is what you were noticing is different, is that we are in vehicle electrification right now. So we're actually starting with vehicle electrification and VMT and not buildings. We're just gonna flip-flop the two and we're gonna keep on cruising.
That sounds good. Yeah, I think your slides were maybe in a different order. And yeah. Ooh, look at that. Okay, I see some number 2s. Cool, cool. So we have 9 people so far weighing in on this one. Oh, there's a little number in the bottom right that counts it for me. Never mind. There we go, 10.
Okay, let's move to the next one.
Cool.
Okay, establish and fund a statewide technical assistance program for public and private fleets to support their transition to zero emission vehicles, including development of a fleet transition plan, an infrastructure assessment, and an electricity rate analysis.
Okay, I see 10 people have weighed in on this one.
Okay, let's there's 11. Let's keep going.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Develop a revolving loan fund to provide low or no interest loans for public and private fleets and middle income households to purchase zero emissions vehicles and infrastructure.
Okay, I see 8 people so far.
We're going to take about 5 more seconds for this one. Okay, let's move to the next one.
Great.
Establish a working group of state entities and others to develop regulations and standards for hydrogen fuel refueling infrastructure, including station certification and testing protocols, as well as safety, fuel quality, and consumer protection standards. Jess, great question. Public transportation development was part of the policy conversations in the transportation working group. It was not solely electric vehicle focused, and there was also some overlap between the transportation electrification group and the low carbon fuels working group. I think when we get to maybe some of like the grid integration and cross-cutting and the vehicle miles traveled reduction part of this, more of what you're thinking about might come out. And right now, because right now we're still in kind of the subheading of vehicle electrification.
See 7 so far. It's 8. Okay, I see 11 here. So good to go, Lauren?
Good to go. Okay, complete a what's MHD stand for?
Medium heavy duty.
Thank you. Complete a medium heavy duty zero emission vehicle technology readiness and feasibility assessment to evaluate zero emission vehicles that can be deployed in the near, mid, and long term based on cost, availability, range, payload, and operational capabilities, including a deployment strategy with medium heavy duty zero emission vehicles roadmap for Oregon policy makers. Sylvia, I see your note. I've got it.
Okay, I see 8 people so far. People, a little bit more time. Eric, I see your hands up. Did you have a question about this one?
I do, and I responded already in the thing, but I'm just curious, like how much of this policy differs from the work that's going on in the ZEBIWIG right now?
I don't know, but we can find out with one of our colleagues. I think that there is some discussion about this, but I'm not sure if it's to the point of an assessment. We
Okay.
can ask our colleague who staffs that group.
That's great. Yeah, it just feels like there's quite a bit of overlap actually with this policy.
Good note. Thank you.
Zach, I see your question. What if it's missing in action? We're going to get to that as well. Because I do want to hear that also. Okay, let's move on to the next one, Richie.
Okay, great.
Complete a statewide assessment of medium heavy duty charging and fueling infrastructure needs, public and depot to meet the targets established by Advanced Clean Trucks. Mark, I also see your question for MHD. Will MHD vehicles be viable? Can there be language to include alternatives? I think that's a good thing to bring to the conversation.
I think that's a good reason to vote, not vote, pick an option. It's not really voting, but pick the 1 or 2 or 0.
Okay, Ruchi, let's keep going.
Cool.
Launch a public information campaign, including an updated webpage, educational video and radio, TV, and social media spots to educate consumers and dealers about the benefits of electric vehicles, including grid benefits such as potential cost savings from participation in demand response programs.
Okay, I see 8 so far. Give a couple more seconds here.
Okay, Ruchi, let's keep going.
Okay.
Require IOUs to publish and maintain interactive circuit level hosting capacity maps, HNCs, HCMs, showing available capacity for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, building electrification, distributed generation, and battery storage. The state should establish uniform standards for data formats and granularity, visualization tools, and public access protocols. Okay, let's go to the next one. Open an investigation into how electric. Sorry. I'm so sorry, everyone. These are a little out of order in comparison to what I'm seeing, and now we're into grid integration. So I just want to. Okay. Open an investigation into how electric utilities can best engage in proactive planning and investment in anticipation of load growth, i.e. prior to load materializing, while minimizing the risk to ratepayers. And maybe let me also do a quick little poll in the chat that we've gone from vehicle electrification, we're heading into grid integration. I would be curious to hear if people want to pause and start having conversation, or if you want to keep on working with the Menti. Jess, I think that's a thumbs up to pause.
Pause and have conversation feels better than going through all of that.
Love that. Okay, Sylvia, let's do it. Can we go back? Edith, can you go to slide 29? And it might be helpful if we put these up so people can kind of be reminded of what the draft policy actions are for vehicle electrification. I have on my list that establish a sustainable source of state funding to support the rapid deployment of charging and fueling infrastructure statewide was one that 7 people would like to talk about today. So I'd love to open up that conversation for establish a sustainable source of state funding to support the rapid deployment of charging and fueling infrastructure statewide. It's the first one on the list. So if anyone would like to come off of mute, start the conversation, I would welcome it. I'd be curious to hear if folks think that there's some specificity missing to this, that it's lacking a justice or equity lens, or if there's something more specific. Zach, I see you saying in the chat, we seem to be missing fully funding the state's existing EV subsidy. I wonder if you would like to come off mute and say a little bit more about that. Maybe my follow-up
Sure.
question. Oh, thanks. Go for it.
So last year, the state's ZEV rebate program, which has extra money for low-income households, ran out of money after about a month and a half. And so the program was only available from mid-April to late May or early June, if I recall correctly. And so the level of demand is much, much higher than the available resources. And so if we want people to be able to continue buying the EVs that they want and getting the rebates that are accessible to some, but not to all because of a lack of funding, then we actually need to fully fund those programs.
Thank you. Zach, you're getting some pluses in agreement.
I'm sorry, Lauren. I had some noise in the office here when you were talking. Which one of these are we starting with?
We're starting with the very first one, establish a sustainable source of state funding to support the rapid deployment of charging and fueling infrastructure statewide. There were, I think, 7 folks who said that there were minor issues with this idea and we should discuss. I'd be curious to know if there's other issues that folks are seeing beyond what Zach has brought to light.
Do you want us to just come off mute, Lauren?
Yeah, Caleb, just come off mute.
Cool. This is John, actually. I don't know.
Oh,
It
it's
said-
John, sorry.
It said
Caleb's
Caleb
lit
in the
up.
box.
John,
Yeah.
get it, John.
I would add to a sustainable source a progressive source of state funding.
Progressive. What does progressive mean to you?
Kind of like the opposite of if it was regressive, it would be something that takes a larger percent of monthly income out of folks' paycheck if they have a lower income versus a higher income. And I think if we're looking at the spectrum of like basic needs to like luxuries, we should tax if it's a sustainable source. I mean, to me that reads as a tax because it's where if we're just having to reappropriate every 2 years, that's less sustainable. So I might be making some leaps here too and just making assumptions, but I think if there is a tax, it needs to be something that is not a basic need. So like a gas tax in some ways could be regressive and penalize people who have a harder time switching over to EVs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, John. I also think that if you said, I think you caveated with, you could be making a leap or you could be reading between the lines, whatever it is. I think if we're able to do that, then other people will be able to do that. And it's a good thing to flag and say, well, this could mean this or it could mean that. So let's be more specific. So I appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Sure thing.
Caleb.
It's sort of just picking up on what John was saying. I like the idea of having some sort of a tiered system so that it's based on fair share. That seems really important. And just going off of what John was saying again, like the word sustainability, I think, can almost run into a little bit of a problem. Sustainability is great, but sustainable can also mean flat. Like with the gas tax, if you have a flat funding source, over time the value of that funding might actually come down. So I like some sort of like progressive funding mechanism or something like that, or I would play with the language there a little bit. And this bullet point too also just brings up a lot of questions for me about, you know, the actual deployment and the plan for deployment and all those things, and making sure that the whatever funding there is distributed very wisely and equitably across the states. Very different urban versus rural. And you know, rural is not a monolith. Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon, high deserts, Blue Mountains, it's all very different. So I just got those little hairs on the back of my neck standing up about it already. Yeah.
Thanks, Caleb. You're getting pluses. Plenty of pluses in here. I love it. Sylvia, please.
Thank you, Lauren. I think maybe building on what I've heard, or that I hope building on what I've heard, I think, or something that I've struggled with is, you know, the maybe openness to where the funding could come from, and the openness to what the funds could be used for. And so I think this idea of targeting funds from this, you know, yet to be defined where the money comes from, fund to where it's needed and where the investment wouldn't happen without the funds. It's a hard exercise because how do you know, where investment will have happened without it? But, you know, I think my experience is folks who are researchers are best set up to take advantage of tax credits, funding opportunities than the folks who would not have been able to deploy the infrastructure and without the particular funding stream. And I'm not even talking residential or, like people in their human being capacity. I'm talking even like governments or entities. The more research are going to be more able to keep an eye on the funding streams and apply and have the capacity and readiness to apply for funding streams. And so I think that, I know that I'm going like super into the weeds here, but those are important, I think, details from like an equity perspective of use of funds. And then on what money goes into the pot of money, I appreciated John's point about, being mindful of not using regressive sources of funding. And I don't really know how you solve that problem, but I am also mindful of that risk.
Mm-hmm. Risk is something I think that's it's important to bring up. And Sylvia, even if you don't know the solution to something right now, that's also part of Odo's responsibility, I think, is to hear what you're saying, take a look at the risk that you've identified, have conversations, look through best practices, see what other states are doing that is working and mitigates the risks that you're bringing up. So I do appreciate that. Thank you. I'm gonna move us on to the next one that I saw a lot of twos on. It was 6 twos for establish a working group of state entities and others to develop regulations and standards for hydrogen refueling infrastructure, including stations, certification, and testing protocols, as well as safety, fuel quality, and consumer protection standards. That's the 1, 2, 3. That's the 4th bullet on this page. Does anyone want to kick off this conversation? And Nikita, I see your chat and we've captured it. Thank you. And thanks, Hugh, for adding it to the chat, the one that we're looking at next. Give folks a second with it to gather their thoughts. And if this isn't the one that we want to look at, that's okay too. So Zach, I see you saying modeling shows hydrogen is crazy expensive. Is this a false solution? It's interesting to think about it like that. And I'm happy to hear if you have a different idea of what a solution could look like in this case, or if you think that it's just something that shouldn't be included. or you can leave it as you have it in the chat, and that's okay too.
Could I mention that at least for the coast, it's not just hydrogen, but how we'd get renewable or biodiesel over here. And I have no problem with looking at hydrogen refueling, but I do think we need to consider how we're going to be able to get the other types of fuel. And maybe I'm okay with this bullet, but some other things need to be done about how to get other fuels to remote areas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm also seeing some great conversation in the chat around the compositions of the working groups and needing ample representation of environmental justice communities. I need to make sure it's not majority industry. So thanks for that piece. Caleb, do you want to wrap us up with this part of the conversation?
Sure. I mean, I won't get super far into the weeds about my own reservations with hydrogen as a actually sustainable, responsible fuel source. But I think it might be worth considering if this is putting the cart in front of the horse. I had read that the PNWH2 system had been on the chopping block for federal funding or was slated to have it pulled back. And I wonder if this is, like I said, not putting the cart in front of the horse a bit. And then aside, if we were going to do something like a work group around this, I think public information campaign and a public education campaign around safety and the risks associated with hydrogen would be extremely important as well. I mean, I don't think that most people know that hydrogen burns invisible, things like that. Maybe some more work to do on that.
Thanks, Caleb. I hear what you're saying around that federal funding piece, and before the Justice 40 initiative had been dismantled, it was included in the Hydrogen Hub's work, and there was a community benefits plan committee that was meeting and working with and talking to the folks around and hearing from environmental justice communities, among other communities in their regions, to really I think do a little bit of what you're saying. However, it's in a stagnant point because of the very reasons that you're saying around the lack of clarity around what comes next there. And I think some of what I've heard throughout this process that I would like to uplift is that maybe we have to stack our functions and have information campaigns with these other products or work groups or whatever it may be, but this is a both and situation and maybe not just all separate. So I appreciate you saying that. I'm also seeing other notes in the chat, and I'm gonna move us along to the next piece here. But I do want to say that I think I've misjudged the Menti, and I would like to move away from it, I think, because I would love to have more of a fluid conversation with folks, because now we won't really be able to dive into as much of the transportation electrification piece, and maybe we can come back to it. But I'm going to encourage you all to, and I see so many important notes in the chat again, to maybe grab those and take what you're thinking and put it into the comment portal. Again, that's something that I'll be looking at. And also, I would say that if folks here think, I wanted to say so much more, I wanted to have a more robust conversation, then I'm always happy to consider an ad hoc meeting if that's something that the group would like. So think about that, and I'll come back to that at the end if that's something that folks wanna chat about. Edith, can you go we're actually going to go back up to slide 27, and now we're going to do the buildings. So I am going to say I think we should skip the Menti. I don't know if everyone, I'd love to hear if there's any like solid, no, I want to do the Menti portion of this. So if anyone is like, yes, stick to the Menti, say so now.
I think it's okay to pivot. We can try the next batch without it, and if it doesn't feel like it works. But I do appreciate you're like trying to take a sense of the pulse in the room and respond in real time. Thank you,
Yeah.
Lauren.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so Sylvia, I think we're saying the same thing, right? To just like try it a little more organically and skip the Menti.
Yes.
Great. Okay, let's do it. So here we have building electrification and energy efficiency, distributed energy resources, and a little bit of cross-cutting. I'm going to say about these ones, they're not maybe quite as formed as some of the other ones are. This group is meeting next week, so you can always go to that group or watch the recording if you want to comment on it more. But the first three are highlighted because that's where Rob, who's our lead for this group, was curious to see if that was if those were areas of interest that you all wanted to discuss. And then the final three. So I'll read them while you take a moment to gather your thoughts and think about where you'd like to build the conversation today. So in building electrification and energy efficiency, modify existing energy rebate programs to primarily serve low-income households and disadvantaged communities, including higher incentive rates and support from community partners. The next one is transition non-income qualified households to programs that offer low-interest financing from revolving loan funds for high-efficiency heat pumps and other energy efficiency measures. Next one is establish flexible funding grant program for statewide weatherization and related deferred maintenance measures. Prioritize homes with greatest needs. Then in distributed energy resources, we have two. The first is develop a guidebook for community-level distributed energy resources and demand response. Tie in resilience and microgrid optionality aimed at supporting smaller municipalities, rural counties, and other groups that cannot afford to participate alone, but could benefit from a collaboration. The second is support adoption of distributed energy resources to increase energy resilience, enable demand response programs, and provide grid services and financial benefits for utilities and customers. The next grouping is cross-cutting. That means that this could hit on not just the buildings group, but in multiple groups, working groups. Develop a grant program to fund HVAC technician and other building trades education programs at community colleges. Prioritize funding to rural parts of the state and disadvantaged communities. So I might ask y'all if you can add to the chat if there's one that you're like, this one makes sense, I'm into it as is, no notes. Maybe you could note that in the chat so that we don't have to have a conversation about it, but it would help me to know that, you know, kind of where the prioritization may lay for folks in the room. But if anyone here would like to kick us off in the conversation, I might even point to the second bullet here that's transition non-income qualified households to programs that offer low interest financing from revolving loan funds or high efficiency heat pumps and other energy efficiency measures, just because it has that revolving loan fund component that I would love to hear from folks about, but also happy to have someone else take the wheel and steer us where you want to have the conversation.
Well, this is Mark.
Hey,
Hey,
Mark.
I have a concern about only having programs for low income households. I think that's great, but there should be a sliding scale. And so many of the disadvantaged communities aren't low income households, and there just needs to be some way to fund other groups because the income level's just too low for most people who would consider like a heat pump or something. Something really needs to be changed and to offer more options for households that make a little more money.
Thank you, Mark. I definitely think that that's one of the barriers and potential strategies that we've heard from this group along the way, and I appreciate you elevating it again. I'm curious in this particular case for the creating a low interest financing from revolving loan funds, if that were for you know, a mid-medium income household, do you feel like that is enough financial support? Is low interest financing still too much interest? Is there a different solution that you could see to provide people with the opportunity who still need some assistance? And you don't have to.
I don't think that's sufficient, but that's just what I was thinking. If there was some funding pot, like say the CPP, that funding could perhaps be better used to consider that sliding scale to get more projects. I'm really big into trying to get as many projects done as possible. And if the income level makes most people not apply for it, I don't think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
I'm gonna add to, or maybe build a little bit of Mark on what you're saying, because I do think that's something we struggle a lot in our space, is the recognition that someone that's like 62% of state medium income is, you know, very, very materially is not that significantly well off that someone that's at 59% of state medium income and can qualify for a number of programs. And so, you know, that's not something that's exclusive to the energy space. It's a conversation, it's like a society-wide conversation about how we define income and, you know, like our need to have this like clearly defined lines for when people qualify for one thing or the other. But the reality is that that often, again, like that difference is very, very subtle, if at all, when you're just above the line or just below. And so Mark, I don't know if I'm adding words to your what you say, or if I'm like imagining you say things, but I think I heard something about like graduating, or like not just completely at, you know, at 61% you have no access to the incentives, but maybe something more gradual where, you know, like as folks if incomes go from low to middle to high, there's a more gradual transition from rebates to loans, for example, right? I don't know if I'm saying that very clearly, and I'm mostly going to try to stay clear of this topic because it might conflict with some of my rules, but that I think the recognition of more gradual solutions is important in our space generally.
Thanks, Sylvia. I'm also seeing your note in the chat about the revolving loan and transportation electrification. And I'll say that I think that the goal here from what I know is that the point of focusing on mid to medium income households is with a revolving loan is because oftentimes, just like Mark was saying, the folks who are not income qualified as low income households, they're unable to access maybe the incentives. And so how can we create some sort of assistance that's accessible for folks, but it would have to be funded. So how would we fund that revolving loan? And that by creating this mid-medium like that level, it opens up what could potentially be 100% of coverage assistance for low-income households to receive that assistance through in an incentive program. So I think I'm hearing what you all are saying is that this needs to be much more explicit, and because if it's not explicit, it could end up leaving people behind.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren, for that. And I think why I added a comment is I went back and I looked at all of the recommendations on the front, and particularly for purchasing vehicles, it's not, there's no the kind of freebie for low-income people programs, right? And so that's why, I mean, can you imagine like a no interest or low interest financing tool for something that folks most of the time are having to access this often predatory rates for because by virtue of their income and their credit? So that's why I was thinking, like, I didn't see a sister recommendation that said, and have this really amazing solution for low-income folks to be able to access zero-emission vehicles. So in light of that missing, that was my comment. But also, even if we had that, it's going to be able to serve a very limited number of people. And particularly in the car space, where folks often do need a car for much as we wish sometimes that people rely on transit, like many people will need a car in different circumstances. Today, their options are often very bad in terms of what type of financing they can obtain to buy a vehicle.
Thanks, Sylvia.
Could I add one thing? Maybe this is a question for the group. I was trying to track this, and I would, welcome Mary to come in to correct me, the economist here. But one of the other, I'm remembering one of the other discussion areas being around this recognition of limited revenue from the state and now federal. And so if there is less revenue to provide programs, what should be prioritized the most? I think it's like sort of this question of like, well, what kind of program offerings might different types of people be able to participate in, and focus a sort of quote unquote more generous incentive for the folks that would not ever be able to participate in something that involves upfront payment through financing or even tax credits. Is that tracking with like some of the maybe reason why there was like a qualification here on like the type of program or the type of program for non-income qualified households? Like if there was like this need to sort of prioritize because of less revenue for these types of programs, I'm curious how folks would sort of react to that.
This is Jess. Yeah, I really appreciate you naming that, Ruchi. And I think that's a reaction I'm having even in the first set of Menti questions. Was some of the things I felt I wanted to talk about was because I was like, if we're creating funding for this thing, then what does that mean for other programs that actually feel more impactful and essential in terms of meeting our climate justice goals? And so I'm definitely feeling that scarcity dynamic we're in for state funding, as well as the federal dynamics around funding that will come towards programs like this.
Thanks, Jess. I see there's so much good stuff in the chat too. I see it all. Zach, I see yours most recently, which really gets to the energy efficiency piece. And I wonder if you want to speak to anything on this particular slide about how you think we should be encouraging efficient equipment over new energy production, or just, I mean, we could just say, how do we encourage efficient equipment in these particular draft policy actions? Do you feel like there's something missing that we need to better, more clearly vocalize? And while you're thinking about that for a moment, I'll also note that there's a lot in the chat about moving to upfront discounts as being the most impactful. So I think that gets a little bit to what we've been talking about before. So I'll just kind of open the floor again. Zach, again, no pressure, but I'm gonna put out a general question too.
I think my question on this slide was related to what does DER stand for? Distributed energy resources, obviously. This might be more appropriate for the following session on the energy generation, but it seemed like there was a desire to have local utilities plan ahead for how they were going to meet increased demand through expanded generation, when it is likely cheaper and easier to actually meet their increased demand through subsidies for more efficient equipment and weatherization.
Mm-hmm.
And then with regards to, being in a resource constrained environment, I think that points to the need to not fund the bad things and redirect those monies towards the good things. So specifically, stop funding new gas equipment through Energy Trust of Oregon and redirect those funds to energy efficient electric equipment. And if we only have so much money, spending money to transition low income gas customers off of gas and to electricity, where there's currently very few subsidies and low income gas customers cannot access BPA funded low income subsidies, that we should be really focusing on helping low income gas customers make the transition off of gas. It'll have greater greenhouse gas emission reductions than electric to electric conversions. And this is the group of folks that don't have access to funds currently. Thanks.
Thank you, Zach. And Jess, I saw that you were giving thumbs up, and I also saw that you raised your hand. Did you want to, and you've got ++ Zach in the chat. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or you good?
I think, yeah, I just really appreciate you naming that, Zach, because even just looking at the tools that exist right now, if you're trying to transition away from an old gas furnace, to be totally frank about it, Energy Trust's policies of not supporting any rebates for fuel switching is a huge barrier. And we're coming up against that in our own Douglas Heat Pump program using chip dip funds, where we have struggled to meet the needs of a lot of low income community members to fully fund their programs because we can't access that Energy Trust money unless they're switching from electric to electric. And that's mostly not the case.
Thank you, Jess. We're about at time for this particular conversation. And again, the things that you all have put in the chat, we're going to capture, but if you want to add to it, please do use that comment portal. And I also would throw out the question of what are the priorities your organization has identified that aligns with the draft policy actions that you have seen here today? That would also be something that we would love to know about, and you can add that to the chat here, or you can put it in the comment portal. However you want to do that would be great. I think it would be helpful for us. Unfortunately, our time is so short. It's so challenging for me to move us on when I'm like, oh, it's such a juicy conversation. But
Can I say one quick thing on Sylvia's chat? The trade-offs conversation on like prioritization and kind of like what Lauren was saying. I think that would be like the perfect. I know that people are like, oh, what should I bother putting it in the comment portal? But like having that written out would be so helpful to our team. So if we don't have like a ton of time to discuss it here, but this is, I think, a way to sort of tee up those ideas in your mind so that you know what to put in the portal. So I don't know, Sylvia, hopefully that helps. But I think that it would be helpful for the energy strategy to touch on, this very realistic issue that we have on limited revenue and where the highest and best use of it is and how that aligns with your priorities of your organization is helpful to know. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks, Richie. Okay, we're gonna move Edith over to slide 32. We are bebopping all over this deck today, and we're still managing it, and thank you all so much. We're gonna take a quick little 5-minute break so that we can all just shake it off. When we come back, we're gonna bop into developing clean electricity generation and transmission. So let's come back at 10:27, everyone. So as you're coming back together here, you can give like a thumbs up or a I'm here in the chat, or you can come on camera, whatever works for you, so I know that folks are here. Greer's here. Thanks, Greer. I suppose I should make sure too that the Odo staff who are helping me out are here too. Thanks, John. I see you're here. Jess, you're here. Thank you. Mary's here. Thanks, Mary. Edith is here. Hugh is here. Okay, I'm going to start us again. I think I prefer if we continue to not do the Menti and we keep on having kind of these more organic conversations, which are feeling like they're working for me. And let's move into slide 33. Thanks, Christina. I'm glad it's working for you too. Okay, cool. We're going to start our conversation on developing clean electricity generation and transmission. Hi, Ruchi. Ruchi's here too. Great. So let's go to the next slide. So Joni is the working group lead for this group. And there's 2 slides here. So we'll spend some of our time on this one and then we'll move into the other one. And so here we've got facilitate responsible development of electricity infrastructure in Oregon. And the draft policy actions are: establish a new state entity to, at a minimum, engage in statewide transmission planning, establish designated transmission corridors, and lead regional engagement efforts on transmission, all with a responsibility to explicitly utilize an environmental justice and energy justice lens and equitable processes through meaningful community engagement to prioritize environmental justice and impacted communities. The second is study barriers to not project, wrong emphasis. Study barriers to project development, particularly barriers affecting projects that do not quickly proceed to construction following siting and permitting approvals. And the third is conduct a statewide land use inventory, update the current land classification, and establish a database of land suitable for various types of renewable energy and low carbon fuel development projects. The next big heading is promote resilience for local communities. The first point is continue and as practicable, expand statewide energy and energy resilience funding opportunities, including a funding opportunity for creating a formalized community benefits plan that provides meaningful engagement in the process for environmental justice communities. House Bill 4077 defines environmental justice communities. The second point is investigate and direct investor-owned utilities to implement microgrid tariffs. So take this in, and I'm happy to open the floor to conversation and hear where y'all would like to start the conversation. There's something here that really stands out to you. Let's see, Greer, I see your question. What kind of tariffs are we talking about? Just curious, we don't have to start here. It's a good question, Greer. I don't know what kind of tariffs we're talking about specifically. I wonder, Edith, do you have an answer to that? Do you know if they're defined?
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I unmute myself here.
No problem.
I don't have an answer right now. I'm actually thinking I wanted to be responsive to you calling on me, Lauren. I really appreciate, Christina, that point.
Okay, then let's just pause there and then I'm going to find out some more information, Greer, and then come back to you. Christina, I see your comment with a plus from Caleb that we should include tribal perspectives in the first bullet, and addition of the language after, quote, a responsibility to other draft policy actions, so it's explicitly called out consistently throughout the strategy policy. Thank you. Sylvia, I see your hand raised, please.
This is my effort to very fully respond to Claire's question. I think it refers to tariffs are a document that utilities file with the Public Utility Commission. I don't really understand them very well. I don't live in the tariff space very much, but I think it outlines how particular programs work. And so I think what this is asking for is that utilities basically stand up microgrid programs, and the tariff will be the document that says how it works and how they're compensated at the PUC. And if John's in the room, I know John, you're heavily involved in the microgrid bills, and you might have more informed information, better information.
Thanks, Sylvia. Sylvia, it's a little bit tricky for me to hear you right now. I don't know, maybe because you're a little bit far from your
Sorry, that's because I have my headphones backwards.
Oh,
So the,
Only you're on camera, so we could enjoy that moment with you.
okay, there you go. Well, yeah, I am glad I was not on camera.
Wait,
But
now
what's
put
what
my
I
glasses
said,
on. Okay, it looks fine now. Go ahead.
now the headphones are fine. It just they feel the same. It's just when you can't, like, I'm recording a voicemail and I was like, what's happening? I'm like, oh, the headphones. So what did anything of what I say come through, or should I repeat it briefly?
I would love it if you repeated it. It was
Okay.
really helpful.
So I was trying to respond to Greer with very limited information. I don't have a huge amount of understanding of this, but I think this refers to basically the utilities creating microgrid programs and compensation frameworks for microgrids, and the tariff would be the document that the utility files with the Public Utility Commission outlining how the program works. But John Seng has been engaged with the microgrid bills, and I don't know, John, if you have like more color to offer here, since I have very limited understanding. I don't usually exist in the tariff world. I just like argue with people about the policy, and then someone else goes and writes the tariff that goes to the PUC.
Thanks, Sylvia. I got a little note from the person who was the working group lead, Joni, for that group, and she's giving you a plus. So thumbs up. I think that's it. I know, John, you were saying John has talked a little bit about microgrids in this process. And if, John, you have anything you want to add, please do let us know.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I think that like some of what's happening this year at the legislature, I hope will address that. And I'm having a hard time thinking of like as far as Odo action items, what those would look like until we know what the I guess this is a little broad, but like, so basically the idea is that these bills will make it so communities can develop and own microgrids. That would be municipalities or community-based organizations or tribal entities. And microgrids are nice because they can save money and also provide energy resilience. So to the extent that Odo can incentivize the development of microgrids for environmental justice communities, that would be awesome. Does that begin to address what you're saying there, Sylvia?
Sorry, and I was like midway through a bite. I think so.
If I could just jump in, I think that this particular policy action is kind of light on detail, you know? So I think that I put this in the chat too, John, but if there were like a opportunity to provide in the comment portal some written details, I think that'd be really helpful to staff to sort of think about like what sideboards might be there. Like I think even your mention of the particular community names would be helpful. And then another kind of piece that might be like something that you've worked out with, the discussions on the bill and stuff is how to ensure that those microgrid tariffs actually result in like local community resilience benefits. Like how to sort of when you think about sort of the financing of these types of projects, there's a tendency for developers to, make the financing pencil out, and that might involve structure of where participation might look different for lower income community members, for example. So is that resilience benefit or cost kind of at that? How would we sort of maybe structure, or what kind of details maybe that would be helpful to add in here that would like sort of help ensure that higher kind of community resilience value? Do you see what I mean there?
Yeah, I think so. Let me give it some thought offline and I can try and get some comments into y'all.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Is there anything else that folks want to bring forward on this first slide? We have one other transmission focused slide after this, so happy to move us along if you want to see that one, and we can always come back, or if there's something that stands out to folks here, we can take a moment.
I've just got a brief comment, sort of. It's a little bit out of place for transmission discussion, so forgive me for that. But just on the subject, as I'm reading the heading here, facilitate responsible development of electricity infrastructure. It seems like if we're not having a conversation about phasing out harmful electricity infrastructure as we're developing new infrastructure, then we're really missing the fastball down the middle here. 4 of the 5 dirtiest power plants in Oregon are within 25 miles of each other out here in Eastern Oregon. It's like 40% of our industrial greenhouse gas emissions every single year, and it's going up. If we're not having the conversation about how to phase those out with sources of electricity that are doing less harm or are mitigating that harm, then I don't know if we're having the right conversation about that particular subject.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Caleb. And I'm seeing Jess and Christina agreeing with you in the chat as well. And it makes me kind of think about that balance and that transition and how we're continuing to build resilience while we're doing this transition. And so if we're facilitating a responsible development, like you were saying, right, it's that, and I think Zach, maybe you've said some of this too in the past, it's that how are we moving from one to the other? Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Thanks, Caleb.
It's part of the conversation, or even there's no name here. Could it part of it be retirements too? And I know that's a hard conversation right now with increasing loads, but maybe that can be part of the feedback that comes out of this group, that it will be good for the energy strategy to talk about retirements of those polluting and harmful facilities, if I understood your comment correctly, Caleb.
I think that's part of it, Sylvia, is like thinking not only about how we're transitioning and also how we're retiring. I wonder if retiring moves us out of that like 5 to 10 year kind of time, like more near future, not immediate, but like near-sighted piece, and moves us into something that's more into that long term. So it's something to think about, and we're definitely gonna note it. Thank you for bringing that up. Eric, I'm gonna come over to you next.
Yeah, I'm just noting the other language around environmental justice communities, and I think the way that the Oregon environmental justice mapping tool is going to be set up is it's more of a like first shot screening tool. You know, it's not a one size fits all, but I think, you know, we'll have opportunities to bring in customized indicators that might be more well suited, you know, for the work, and just like a special definition for environmental justice communities that's more closely tied to the energy infrastructure. I think we'll be fairly well set up for that probably by the end of 2026.
Thanks, Eric. And I'll note that Eric is over at the Oregon Health Authority and helping to lead a lot of the work on the environmental justice mapping tool for the state of Oregon. And so if folks have questions about that or how to get involved or to provide input, I'm happy to connect you to the opportunities, and you're welcome to reach out to me so that maybe you can have conversations about those indicators. Thanks, Eric. I'm going to move us to the next slide so that we have some.
Can I just say one quick thing, Lauren,
Okay.
on the facilitate responsible development, on the point that Phil was making and some of the pluses in the chat. There was one thing I wanted to mention, which is like, you know, the modeling exercise that happened in phase 1 and the findings that came out of it sort of looked at out to 2050, any existing gas plants would be used a lot less and for a different purpose. And so even if they maybe are retired or some are not retired, it looks like at least the trajectory of what the energy strategy is going to considering is like less use and less emissions overall, and like perhaps only being used at the sort of most difficult times for like either integration or demand. But that would be maybe something to sort of acknowledge too, like in the overarching, like Lauren was saying, like the longer term versus the short term, there might be some need to sort of like, what is the value of these gas plants over time, and which ones maybe are no longer needed for that value or like used for a different purpose altogether. So I just wanted to like sort of say that it might be able to also show up in like sort of a more of like the longer pathway as well as in like a policy action.
Thank you. You can see that Edith has transitioned us to the next slide because I want to have time to look at these ones as well and see if there's anything that folks want to elevate. So we've got two different big headings here. The first one is foster regional collaboration and efficient resource sharing. The draft policy actions are continue and as practicable, increase collaboration with neighboring states and regional entities. And the second point is study potential for shared risk development models to secure large-scale investments, including long lead time resources and emerging generation and storage technologies. And the next big heading is the cross-cutting ideas, which means that this isn't just about transmission, it's about maybe multiple working group buckets. So the first point is integrate electric and natural gas resource planning to support the timely and orderly shift to electricity and clean fuels that prioritizes an equitable transition to explicitly include environmental justice communities. The second point, extend House Bill 2021 clean energy requirements to new large loads. And the third point, investigate and implement performance-based rate making for investor-owned utilities. And Jess, I see your note. Can you say more about what extend HB 2021 clean energy requirements to new large loads means? And I'm going to ask either Ruchi or Edith if you can take this one.
I can jump in if that's helpful.
Great. Yeah, do it.
The idea here is to try to address new large loads, particularly data centers that are coming online. Often these companies have voluntary clean energy targets, but we've also seen that when they come online, they're often making a lot of unspecified market purchases, and that really increases our state's overall emissions. When these are in kind of territories of utilities that are not covered by House Bill 2021. So it's an idea of how we might signal that new large loads need to align with Oregon's clean energy policy objectives, because they sort of fall outside of them and risk raising the state's emissions profile.
John's loving it. He says, love this plan to extend House Bill 2021 requirements to new large load. Jess says, thank you. John's giving this one a 5. Christina also giving that a thumbs up.
One other thing in here that is like, this is one of the other ones that's kind of short on detail. So if there's like additional thoughts you're having on details that could be added to like how this would potentially work, or what kind of like other considerations to think about, like the data center example, we hear pretty frequently that their business model requires them to have like no interruptions of energy along the way. So they have like a strong interest in potentially having like renewables or clean energy for their sort of corporate responsibility. But then at the same time, for backup, they might have like diesel generators or other kind of emission intensive technology to sort of continue their like uninterrupted energy supply. So anyway, just some food for thought on details if you're having them in terms of what, you know, your thoughts are for comment portal or in the chat.
There's also some there's some chats here that I'll just say are, listen, I'm going to be very honest. I am not an energy expert. And so this conversation really starts to pull me out of my depth. I'm still learning a lot in this particular space. So Ruchi and Edith, there's quite a bit of clarifying in the chat, and I'd love it if you both can kind of help to facilitate this piece.
I'm going to go in reverse order just because I think I want to connect this to the conversation we were just having. So the HB 2021, Christina, your question, are utilities outside of HB 2021 BPA customer utilities? Essentially, yes, the framing is that HB 2021 covers Portland General Electric, PacifiCorp, and electricity service suppliers, which are kind of competitive. It's our competitive retail market, which only serves larger loads in the state. So essentially it means that our consumer-owned utilities fall outside of those requirements, although our renewable portfolio standard, I'm not going to get into, but does cover BPA customer utilities in different ways depending on their size.
Thanks, Edith. Christina's saying that's helpful.
And I think on long lead time resources, have we answered that yet? Or is that another one that would be helpful?
And I think that I asked that question because I think it will help support conversation because not everyone might be familiar with what type of technologies we typically consider in those buckets.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. So it's a great question. So we're focusing on what needs to happen in the near term. We know that in the longer term, our modeling was kind of showing that around 2040, we start to need some additional resources that operate with a pretty high capacity factor. And the ones that currently tend to be discussed in most detail are enhanced geothermal, floating offshore wind, and small modular nuclear, although we can't cite that small modular nuclear in Oregon, but doesn't mean that it's not something that's talked about. You could put batteries in that, kind of newer battery technologies in that bucket too. And so the idea is kind of how do we prepare to be able to have those resources when they need them, when it's kind of difficult for utilities, for example, to include them in their IRPs because they're so far into the future. So it's kind of a strategic question about how we as a state kind of can think about the risks of investing in something that may or may not pan out, but also the need to start to invest a bit in and explore some of those kinds of resources. I think, Sylvia, we're pretty technology neutral on it. So I don't know that we were thinking of pumped storage specifically, but I think you could kind of include any resource that isn't kind of to market that we know we need down the road.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking, just remembering past conversations about like I'm not involved in them, but I see them in like the RFP context of like how can utilities procure long lead time resources? And so that's why I was trying to get a little bit more definition of examples, not assigning, not assuming that Odo is proposing anything in particular, but thank you.
It sounds to me too like there's maybe a few other clarifying pieces in this particular conversation. And I'll let you all know that the transmissions conversation will be happening today. There are working groups happening later today at 2 p.m. And so you're all welcome to attend and listen into that meeting, get more information, more clarity, and can then use what you learn there to put into the comment portal. And I will also let you know when the recording is up. And when the recording goes up, we also have notes so that you can always, control F if there's a particular topic that you want to look for in the notes. And so I'm sorry that this is, again, a short conversation. Please utilize that comment portal. Jess, I'm seeing your note also here. And I'm going to move us into our last working group conversation with the draft policy actions, which is low carbon fuels. So we'll start off here with fuel supply. And there's three different sections or big headings for this. And the first one, fuel supply, and the points here are explore opportunities to facilitate low carbon intensity fuel production facilities in Oregon. The second point is conduct a statewide land use inventory, update the current land classification, and establish a database of lands suitable for various types of renewable energy and low carbon fuel development projects. The third point is update and expand biogas and renewable natural gas inventory report to evaluate all biogenic feedstock opportunities in the state and how they can be used for biofuels. And the fourth point is funding and technical assistance for investments in fuel innovation pilot projects such as hydrogen, biofuels, thermal energy networks, and geothermal projects. So I'm going to give it a moment for you all to kind of take this in. And if you have clarifying questions or a place you'd like to start this conversation, please do. You can either, oh, Eric, great, come on in.
Yeah, here the devil's in the details, as I mentioned before with some of these policy actions, and that conducting the land use inventory. Are you guys going to be working with Department of Revenue? I know that there are some counties in Oregon that have had extremely complicated data sets. I assume you guys are going to be using the cadastral layers. You guys have your work cut out for you.
Thanks, Eric. I'm seeing, Caleb, your note, and also Greer's, I think, kind of piggybacks on that, saying, quote unquote, suitable for development projects needs to be defined in an environmental justice context. Is it suitable to cite something in an already overburdened community? And that got some pluses, and Greer added, will there be community input in the process of these new projects? And I think along the lines of how Eric just said that, the devil's in the details. And so if you feel that there's language that's missing so that we can explicitly and purposefully say how environmental justice communities should be a part of the process, I would love to hear that.
Maybe I can just jump in on part of that, Lauren, which is just to say that these are the expensive options. They're kind of the most expensive options, but they're necessary based on the modeling that we've done and the results that came out, because it's not possible to electrify all of the end uses. And so for sectors that still rely on liquid or gaseous fuels, it's really important to start to think about how we develop those alternatives. And then the reason for talking so much about electrification is so that is because that's lower cost to decarbonize than to rely on fuels. Recognize
also-
I'm not naming the full portfolio of costs here. This was kind of the least cost economy-wide analysis. So I also want to just recognize that that should be part of the discussion, but wasn't in our modeling.
I think there was a similar question also back when we were talking about, I think, hydrogen. And I think maybe Jess brought up the point and wondering if it was for hard to electrify areas and industries. And so it's a similar conversation, I think. Eric, please.
Yeah, I'm a little less concerned about being like once the suitable land uses are identified, I'm a lot less concerned about, you know, being able to identify those areas and communities where there are cumulative impacts being experienced by community members. We'll have the underlying data for that, you know, to build up all of these census tract level indicators that Odo will have access to. And so I think there's a good path forward for that.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, I'm gonna move us to the next slide for conversation. Again, I just want to point out that these highlighted sections are sections that the lead, Michael, asked to just kind of bring to the attention of the group because he would love some help with y'all's expertise and experience in thinking about these particular draft policy actions. So the big heading here is electrification and strategic consumption. And the first point is integrate electric and natural gas resource planning to support the timely and orderly shift to electricity and clean fuels while prioritizing an equitable transition to explicitly include environmental justice communities. The second point is investigate and implement performance-based rate making for natural gas and electricity utilities. And the third point is fund a consumer-facing energy transition service program to educate and financially support residential and commercial building conversions from primarily natural gas, propane, or oil heat to efficient electric options owned or operated in low-income, rural, and disadvantaged communities. And again, you can think about this a little bit in that Menti process kind of way, that if there's something that you're like, yep, that one I'm thumbs upping as is, you can also note that in the chat if that's of interest. But please do let us know if there's something here that you all would like to speak to.
I'm all for the third bullet point, and it also sounds pretty similar to what the One Stop Shop 2.0 bill would do that's working its way through the legislature right now. Would this be like something complementary to it, or is this just purely, you know, talking about whether that's a good idea at this point?
It's a good question. It also kind of gets to Eric's question in the chat of asking how it differs from what the Energy Trust is already doing. So I wonder, Edith, do you know the answer to that?
Well, I think part of the answer is was already mentioned earlier in today's meeting, which is the Energy Trust can't pay for fuel switching, and so there's a gap there. I think oh God, I lost my second thought. I'm sorry. This meeting is like, this is a long meeting, y'all. Oh yeah, sorry. On the I don't know the details of the bill, but the One Stop Shop is an informational source that provides kind of a pathway to get at what kind of funding opportunities you might qualify for based on information that you fill in on kind of income, households, housing type, fuel type, et cetera. But I don't know that it provides the financial support. So I think that there would be a way for this to align with that. But one of the things that we're going to be doing is once session has ended and we know where all the bills have landed, we are going to do an analysis and kind of a cross check between what came out in the bills that passed, what we're suggesting so that it makes sense.
That's awesome. Thank you. It kind of sounds like this. So like, if I'm hearing you right, One Stop Shop 2.0 would be an informational source, and what you're talking about here would like combine information with funding.
That's the idea. Yes.
Cool.
Although I'll say I'm pretty sure that bill doesn't include funding because the One Stop Shop is really focused as an informational resource, but I'd have to look at the bill to make sure I was correct on that.
No, that sounds right. I guess what I'm curious about then is like would this be something that aggregates existing funding sources and creates new funding sources?
This is one of the things that we still have to work through at Odo is how detailed the recommendations are and how much we leave for others to elaborate on. So we're putting recommendations to the governor and legislature. So we're not providing like the full kind of guts of how something might be structured. I think this would have to be, I mean, as a matter of principle, we're trying to make things additive and complementary rather than adding things that are completely separate. And so I think ideally what we'd want to do is make sure that this integrates with what's existing, but also like bolsters it. But we haven't gotten to that level of discussion yet. I think anything in written comments that you want to add to say, it would be great to add this here, like the more specificity in your comments, the better. That's really useful for us as we think through these details, because it is important to think through the details, even if the energy strategy doesn't get into that level of detail.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm also just going to note before we move on that there's a couple pieces in the chat here. Zach noting that there need to fully fund existing subsidies for heat pumps, so there are funds to connect people to. And then Mark Keeley says, One Stop Shop is great. However, there needs to be an outreach, perhaps door-to-door information sharing. Most lower income groups don't have time to go to One Stop Shop shopping. All the paperwork is too much for most of the low income groups. They need someone who will help them out. And I think that maybe that also gets to some of what we've heard around the need for more resource sharing, education, informational materials to go out with some of this, with some of these draft policy actions.
Hey, Lauren.
Yes.
Can I hop in real quick?
Please, is that Greer?
This is Greer.
Yeah,
So
go for it, Greer.
Thanks. I just wanted to add that, One Stop Shop 2.0, the idea behind it is that they will hire a staff person, because someone put in the chat that, people would need guidance through the process, which I completely agree, because it is a lot of paperwork and a lot of filing things, and to a couple people's point, it's these people who are from burdened communities having to do that work. And just won't have time for it. So the One Stop Shop 2.0 will include a staff person to help people do that and navigate that process. But like other people have pointed out, it does not include the funding aspect that this third bullet point adds. So I just wanted to add those two things.
Thank you, Greer. Edith, anything to wrap that up for you?
Nope. Just that I really appreciate all of the additional feedback here and encourage more. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so unfortunately at this point, I'm gonna transition us out of the draft policy actions conversation and move us into kind of the second part of our process together. And again, I just want to recognize that I know we did not get into all of the conversations that folks want to get into today. There's just not enough time. So please do use the comment portal as we've been saying. And if at any point, again, people have clarifying questions, you're always welcome to reach out. And even if I don't know the answer, I do know how to reach the other people who do have answers. Okay, and with that, maybe just take a second if you need to like shake out your arms or move your neck around or twist in your chair, because we still have a full hour. And this is another big conversation. So just take a second to do what you need while Edith pulls up our next slide. Okay. Oh, actually, Edith, you can go back to the other one. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start talking about developing equitable and environmental and equitable and environmental justice process. So like I said at the beginning, throughout our process together, we've been hearing a lot, not just about the specific policy strategies or what's embedded, but also about that big picture or the umbrella. We just spent time with the specific and embedded policy actions, and now I'm going to move us into the umbrella or the big picture. We need to develop a system or a framework that centers equitable outcomes throughout the energy policy process beyond what policy recommendations are named in this energy strategy. We want to be sure that the framework is explicit and grounded in best practices, lived experiences, and professional expertise. Our plan at Odo is to use the issue statements and strategies and conversations we have had to develop some guidance that can be used on many levels, from lawmakers to agency staff. The document we're working to create should challenge the status quo. We don't want to perpetuate energy burden and continue harms through energy policies. We want to create more equitable strategies and actions and outcomes. The current status quo provides electricity and fuels to people for their energy needs, and for many people in communities, this involves high energy burden, which means there is a higher cost of energy compared to a lower household income. It can create negative health effects from energy-related pollution in the air, land, or water, like asthma, heart disease, or cancer. And there's a lack of resilience against climate effects, like wildfire, heat waves, and drought. At the same time, we need to move towards cleaner sources of energy to address these status quo issues. As the state adopts new programs, regulatory structures, and business models, we have to be intentional not to perpetuate or repeat these negative effects, but rather address them and improve these issues. And this is important for many reasons, but two I'm going to highlight are: one, greater participation across all people and communities so that they are also using the new technologies of clean energy; and two, developing sustainable new policies and programs over time so they aren't creating other issues around cost, food, or shelter. So with that in mind, I want to again root us in some definitions, some we've used before. These are just one interpretation. So I really want your feedback and wordsmithing so that it makes sense for Oregonians and specifically for people who have been and are excluded from governmental processes. And you may want to add more to this conversation later, and I welcome that. This is just the first part of developing our framework. I'll also note that you may want to add more to the conversation later because you have a conversation with colleagues or community members, and you hear something that you think will be important and valuable for this part of the process. So if we go to the next slide, we want our framework to have shared and clear definitions that are easy to understand and build an understanding of the process. And because this is the energy strategy, we want it to be fundamentally rooted in energy justice. So we're going to start with defining the term. I'm going to start off with the work that's being done or has been done by the Energy Equity Project out of the University of Michigan and their energy equity framework that they created. In this framework, they remind us that energy justice is intersectional. It's born of the environmental justice movement, which is born of the civil rights movement, and is connected to climate justice. And these are all stacked and braided and woven together. And as is noted in this particular framework out of the University of Michigan, energy justice is multidimensional. So we're building an energy strategy that we want to be set in energy justice. Before we move on, I'd love to hear if there's anything that folks want to add to this around what energy justice is, or if there are clarifying questions. Okay. And if something comes up as we're going through that you want to go back to, that's okay too. We can always go back. Oh, okay, great. I see Christina in the chat. Interdimensional to the first bullet point. Thank you. Do you want to say anything else about that, Christina?
Struggling to find my mute button. No, I really like that you said that. It kind of ties everything together, I think, to say, you know, like this is being looked at from all of these different lenses.
Cool, thank you. Any other thoughts from folks on this?
It's kind of implied in the connection to the EJ and the civil rights movement, but I think it's important to be explicit that energy justice needs to be systemic in nature because it's born of systemic problems and systemic injustices.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Caleb. Great. Okay, keep thinking about it. Let it marinate. Happy to come back to it. Let's go to the next slide. So I would love to have a more of a definition. In the paper Fostering Justice Through Engagement, a literature review of public engagement in energy transitions, the authors define energy justice as a global energy system that fairly disseminates both the benefits and costs of energy services, and one that has representative and impartial energy decision making. This is like a pretty heady and academic definition, and I'm curious what people's reactions are to it, and if you would keep it or change it or edit it. How does it feel to you?
I would love to see a mention of clean energy in there. 100% renewable.
Thanks, John.
I'm gonna copy and paste the Initiative for Energy Justice definition because it feels a little less cold. I don't know, like not to say, you know, like this is what you say, academic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing your choice. I'm just, when I read it, I was like, I know, seen cozier, better, you know, like more warm definitions. And I just copy it down, and I'll copy the website too.
Thank you.
That doesn't mean we have to go with this one. I'm just offering addition or alternative.
Yeah, Sylvia, I'm going to read out what you wrote because other people are saying they like it much better. So it says, energy justice refers to the goal of achieving equity in both the social and economic participation in the energy system, while also remediating social, economic, and health burdens on those disproportionately harmed by the energy system. Energy justice explicitly centers the concerns of communities at the front line of pollution and climate change. Frontline communities, working class people, indigenous communities, and those historically, I lost my place. Where did it go? And those historically disenfranchised by racial and social inequity. Energy justice aims to make energy accessible, affordable, renewable, and democratically managed for all communities. Lots of pluses, much betters. I agree. That reads much more, what's the word? It's like with feeling, with humanity in it. Thank you, Sylvia, for sharing that. Okay, Are there any other thoughts on this one?
No, I'll just add one question. I don't know if others have a thought on this. I've been curious about the phrase democratically managed. I've seen it in other kind of explainers as well, or other kind of articles I've read, but I was curious what it means to people, because some of us react to that and say, oh, that means a consumer-owned utility, but maybe that's not what you mean. So I just was wondering if there was any more sort of on that part specifically.
So I read parts of the book of one of the three founders, and I think in her vision of I got the name of the book, Shalanda Baker's book. I don't remember, but one of her vision that's heavily rely on consumer-owned utilities, which when I was reading it, my sense was I have such a different experience with consumer-owned utilities here, but Greer Ryan from I don't know, she's at SIA now, I think, say that in other parts of the country the experience is different, and so not all of the elements of energy justice might be attainable in a particular region, as this definition is, but or describes. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that in I don't read their minds, but based on having read part of Shalanda Baker's book, I do think that their vision leans more toward consumer-owned utilities as a democratically controlled model. I don't know how applicable that would be to here, but that to me still doesn't make me feel, and it doesn't make me reject the definition, even if we cannot get 100% out of all the vision that it describes.
Thanks, Sylvia. And Jess is saying plus to that as well. I'll just say it's right here. I have it on this is Shalanda's book, Shalanda Baker book right there. So I love it. Okay, great. I'm seeing lots of pluses on this. Again, if something comes up and you think, oh, I wanted to add something, we can always come back. Yeah, this is Shalanda H. Baker's Revolutionary Power, an Activist's Guide to the Energy Transition. Okay, let's move on to the next slide and some more definitions. So when we first met, we talked about distributive, procedural, and recognition justice, and all of these are included in the Energy Equity Project. And Sylvia reminded me that we need to also include restorative justice, which is also included in the Energy Equity Project. And they call it these the 4 pillars of energy justice. Restorative justice is recognizing past harms and burdens to energy burdened and excluded communities to proactively develop policies that actively and purposefully include them throughout energy policy processes. Distributive justice refers to the spatial aspects of energy, and this includes how energy resources are distributed geographically, as well as the distribution of the benefits and risks associated with energy production and use. Energy resources are not equally distributed across the state. Different types of energy resources are not distributed equally, and the infrastructure that we develop to harness those resources is not equidistant from all communities. And for something like this, we might ask, how do we make sure that rural communities are not unfairly burdened by the physical placement of a technology? Or are the benefits of a technology, such as the energy itself and any financial incentives, equitably distributed across urban and rural communities? And then procedural justice states that all groups should be able to participate in decision-making and that their decisions should be taken seriously throughout. And this principle is about process and participation. How do we make equitable decisions about energy, and who's at the table when the decisions are made? How can we include an equitable decision-making process or in policy recommendations? Who does the project design benefit and burden? And then while procedural justice calls for all groups to participate, recognition justice works to understand and meet the needs of vulnerable populations or marginalized communities to make sure that certain groups or cultures do not dominate the conversation. And we can look at the state's definition of environmental justice and think about how policy recommendations may affect those groups of people and how to include people with those identities in the decision-making process. And these are all ones that we talked about in our very first meeting together. And now that we're to this portion of our conversation, I'm curious if you think these are still definitions that we should use, if we need to wiggle them a little bit, if you think that there's an order that they should go in, or is it a cycle? What does it look like to you? Or if it sounds right, you can just say good to go. Or if you say need more time to think about this one, that's cool too.
I had a question.
Yeah,
Sorry, I just hopped on, so you maybe
go for it.
Yeah, you maybe already said this, but are these definitions, so is the thinking around including them, like, are these terms used as like explanation or justification for the strategies throughout the energy strategy? Are these are we using these as sort of like the framework as like for developing strategies, or for what actions are being put into the strategy? Just want to like understand why we would define these in the strategy.
Yeah, so this is kind of that umbrella piece that I mentioned before. So that in the energy policy, in the energy strategy itself, there's going to be a section that is more in line with this umbrella about how are we approaching energy justice in all energy policy decision making. And so the goal is to have these very clear terms and understanding for folks who are reading it, whether they're in an agency or at the legislative level, to be able to say, oh, okay, if I'm looking at this particular policy that's going to be developed, let me think, is this addressing restorative justice? Am I thinking about procedural justice while we're moving this policy forward? This is that framework piece, and it's different from what we were just doing, which is more of that embedded piece of how we're including justice and equity, and a justice and equity lens in the wording, or in the wording of the actual action. And so this is a slightly different section of the report.
Okay, so it's kind of like these are the frameworks that are sort of guiding our strategies, are guiding our actions. It's like our actions around participation in decision-making processes are like geared towards equitable participation. So it's like, yeah, so basically saying that these are guiding what is going into the strategy.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Caleb?
Thanks. On recognition justice, I think it's really important to talk about how we're defining parties. I think this is like a white whale issue for us out here in Northeast Oregon. You can't just, I feel like what happens a lot is you try to define parties by affiliation or by demographics, which is important. Say someone's a member of a tribal government, or somebody is a member of the immigrant community. All of that is important context, but it can't stop there. It has to go beyond that, and it has to be defining parties based on their interest. That's, I think, how the best way to get to how do you identify the interests of frontline communities and make sure that they're participating. Otherwise, what happens a lot, and we see a lot in our work, is you have somebody acting as a representative of a party because they're a rural community member, but they represent industry. that's what their driving interest is. That's what they're there for. They may be a well user, they don't have a contaminated well. They may live in a county with a power plant, but they don't live downwind of that power plant. Things like that. You have to define parties based on interest. That's like the fundamental level you have to get to. I'll stop ranting.
Caleb, that's what this is for. Thank you. Okay, Christina, I also see your note. I think of it as a cycle. And in distributive, I think including access would be helpful to call out distances and related costs. Thank you. And Nikita, I see your note also. I think something about mitigating harms, minimizing burdens is important to restorative justice, not just recognizing harms to proactively developing policies, but the goal is to mitigate these harms and shift to maximizing benefits. Thank you. Lots of pluses and clappings and thumbs uppings. Okay. Any last thoughts on this one for now? Which again, it's not a closed door. Okay, I'm going to move us to the next slide. Okay, so this kind of brings us to the core of our conversation for this particular section. And we barely introduced this idea. I say we very loosely as if it's not just me. I have barely introduced this idea the last couple of times that we've met. And now we're in it. So we want to describe a process for the Oregon Energy Strategy that shows how to prioritize justice and equity across all the decision-making and energy policy development. And I'm hoping, and if you didn't, that's okay too, that you were able to take a look at the Washington Department of Commerce's key actions and process that they included in their report as a chapter titled Build an Equitable, Inclusive, Resilient, Clean Energy Economy. And this chapter provides context, examples, and a 7-step process for building equity into clean energy policies. And Mary and I have taken what we've heard throughout our conversations, and we developed that matrix that I shared with y'all that we would love your feedback on. I breezed over it at the beginning of our conversation today, and now we're going to go step by step and have a conversation that helps us to wordsmith, get more directly to the point, explicitly says what's needed, calls out gaps, all while thinking about those definitions that we just talked about around justice in those 5 different ways. And then once we've gone through this practice, Mary and I, we're going to work on a second draft, and that's going to include more context around energy justice and the 4 pillars, more of a write-up with some narrative. And then I'm going to send it all to you again with the hopes that you're able to add more feedback or edits or thoughts or questions. And you can do this with your colleagues or your communities. And then we'll take it and we'll do a 3rd final draft, and we'll send it out to you one more time so that if there's anything like major and glaring that you're like, Lauren, no, this is a hard no, or yeah, this looks good, but maybe you could add this. We can do that last universal review with it. And so that's where we're going to head next. And Sylvia, I also see the point that you just made in the chat, so I'm copying and pasting that too. Okay, so let's move into the next slide. So this is the first big heading that we gathered, and we've got the little stickies on each of the slides to kind of show you where these ideas came from. But if you think that there's something different or to add, this is where we want to hear it. So the big heading for this one is equitable access to decision-making processes. These big headings are things that we need in order to create equitable and just energy policies. The issue statement here is environmental justice communities, particularly tribes, rural, and coastal communities, are not included in decision-making processes in a way that centers equity and justice practices. I'm sorry, I should have said that the issue statements are all ones that you've seen before. I think in maybe last meeting, we talked about them and moved through them. So the proposed strategies to address the barriers, and this is what would show up in the report. Any policy or program to expand necessary energy infrastructure should be designed to ensure environmental justice and energy burdened communities have equitable access. Participation of environmental justice organizations and community members should be appropriately compensated for sharing their personal experiences and professional expertise. And there's 2 points to this. First, participation of environmental justice groups in any decision-making bodies, including committees, commissions, and task forces, etc. And the second, develop a statewide policy to reduce barriers to participation in decision-making bodies by environmental justice groups, which could include a process for financially supporting participation and incorporating the cost of this into agency program planning. So the curiosity for me here is, do you think that this strategy properly addresses the issue statement and gets us to equitable access to decision-making processes within the creation of energy policies? Happy to hear clarifying questions or thoughts. And maybe another way for me to frame this is that umbrella piece. And so if this were going, when this report goes to the legislature and we are asking the legislators to review the energy policy recommendations that are in the report, we want them to be thinking through these strategies to make sure that equity and justice are always embedded in what they're reading. So if you think there needs to be something else. Yeah, Caleb.
Sorry to take up so much air in the room.
Okay.
I don't think this quite gets us there personally. I think I read the proposed strategy and it looks to me like an improvement on what might be in statute, but it also looks a lot like what's said a lot as we're trying to do public participation already. I think, just having somebody from an EJ community participate in a decision-making committee or something like that doesn't mean that that participation is built so that it can be meaningful. And like what I was saying earlier about, having people participate based on interest. Just because you're from an EJ community doesn't mean that you have the experience or the priorities that the frontline communities there do. I think it needs to be a little bit more framed around meaningful participation, impactful participation. And I don't think it's enough to just reduce barriers. I think that there needs to be like solicitation of people to participate. Just because, you're making it easier for people to come to you doesn't mean that they know they need to come to you or that there's an opportunity to come participate in something. I know it's a big lift and it's really resource intensive, but actually getting out in the community, door knocking, asking questions, hosting forums, things like that to find people to do that participation. I think that is, it's the measure twice, cut once, go the extra mile so that you have the right people in the room making those decisions. I would rather see it go a little further in that sort of direction.
Thank you, Caleb. I think some of what you're getting to also speaks to some of the other big headings down the road. And so it's going to be important to consider how, because none of these work alone, I don't think, right? Like we have to have one with the other. And we want to make sure that one is clear, but also with an arrow that says, and don't forget about this one too, if you're going to do this one. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and it's definitely making me think about how to make that more clear and better defined in the conversation. Or in writing, I should say, because it wouldn't be a conversation. It has to be clear on paper. And I'm seeing too, Eric, I see it, strategies within the strategies. And Christina saying, I think including some technical assistance so that people are more likely to participate so they don't feel like there is a large learning curve. Do you want to say anything else about that one, Christina?
I think people in general, if they don't have experience in engaging in a certain way and you come into a meeting and there's a bunch of experts, it can be a little intimidating. And so I think having like some kind of technical assistance that provides information beforehand so that people feel like, okay, they're up to speed. I'm here to offer my perspective, that, the work group or whoever values. I think that would go a long way to getting people engaged.
Great. Thank you, Christina. And I see other people are plussing that one. So great stuff. Thank you. Nikita, go for it.
Yeah, I think building off of Christina's suggestion, something that I think about a lot is that decision-making spaces and like task forces, commissions, committees are great for sure, but they don't tend to be geared towards receiving or collecting input from EJ representatives or community. And kind of speaking to what Christina's saying, I've definitely been part of committees, and I think we all have, where we're like, okay, I feel, yeah, this is like above what I know, and this is like going maybe too deep in the weeds, or like talking about things in a way that is inaccessible. So I wonder if there's like something here to be added around um uh just like making spaces more accessible. So not just like bringing people in, but like making the spaces that they're in like useful and meaningful. Yeah, to what Caleb was saying. So I don't know if there's something there about like accessibility. It's not even accessibility, it's just like talking about things in a way that is conducive to like EJ groups and community members and impacted folks like providing input.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a language thing, I guess.
Yeah, but I think that language is important. And the useful piece, I really like that language. I want to move us to slide 50, Edith, because I think it maybe builds a little bit on it, and I would love to hear. I feel like maybe some of what's missing is missing on this slide around what we're talking about. It's a both and. So the big heading here is develop partnership and resources in environmental justice communities. This big heading was born out of the education resources tools information sharing big heading before. The issue statement is end users and those in the workforce need better resources to understand energy technologies, programs, and how they are beneficial or burdensome so they can participate in the process of program development, rulemaking, and consumer education. And the proposed strategy here is provide community outreach and informational opportunities that include in-person engagement, offer other resources and tools that are in plain language in multiple languages, and third, partner with community organizations who are trained and compensated appropriately to be trusted partners and community navigators in the field. So I'm curious if some of what was missing in that first one is here, and if also here needs to be more specific still. Because it still isn't getting to that useful piece, I think. Yeah, Eric thinks meaningful engagement would better align with House Bill 4077. Agree.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing. Steer clear of the, I would recommend that you steer clear of the term inclusive engagement,
Mm-hmm.
just because it can be um, widely interpreted and sometimes not helpful. A lot of people interpret that term as you need to include everybody in the community in the decision-making process, and that is obviously unwieldy.
Great point. I think that really aligns with what Caleb was also saying earlier around identifying the audience and understanding the needs that people are saying and then purposefully bringing them in. Thanks, Eric. That's great.
I just add something that's on my mind.
Please.
And it doesn't necessarily fit within these boxes. We had a heck of a time at the tribe to try to get our solar panels integrated into Pacific Power's grid. We need support, and now we're looking at, you know, some kind of microgrid perhaps, but we need help from DOE to help us get to that point. It's really hard for cities and tribes and other groups to get their solar panels integrated. It that partnership with the utilities is really critical too.
Thank you. Yeah, there's multiple levels of involvement here, and we have to have the people who are in those places of power. We've got to bring them along. Thank you. Christina, do you want to come off of mute and say more about what you put in the chat?
Yeah, I thought I saw earlier in the slide presentation something around performance metrics related to utility rates. And so I was thinking, like, if that might incentivize utilities to connect solar projects to the grid, if that was one of the metrics, and not, you know, kind of maybe strong arm them into working with people that aren't technical experts.
Thank you. Ruchi, do you want to say anything here?
I think it's really interesting. I think performance-based rate making has been a topic that's been around for a while, and like, I don't know, I just haven't really figured out how to move it forward. It's such a big topic, you know, but I recently learned that there's some efforts at the PUC even right now to layer in some sort of like performance mechanisms within their processes. So that might be kind of like, I don't know, a more, you know, because I think Lauren's been trying to say, like, what can we do the next 2 to 4 years, you know? So is it like a huge shift in the way everything works all of a sudden, or maybe at least some of these incremental metrics or measures that could be layered into the existing processes? And I think that would be really interesting. Like, what would we want to incentivize exactly? Is it resilience? Is it local? I don't know. I mean, I think there's sort of like the utility piece and clarifying that they have a financial incentive, but also maybe like an expectation from their regulators in some way. Maybe the tariff idea earlier on the microgrid tariff is like another way to get at that, because it's clarifying like kind of who does what in a tariff. And then to like the point earlier, it's one thing for the utility to sort of do some of this work, but the local like government or the tribe or the local government, there's a technical assistance element of like being able to support the conversation about integrating or interconnecting, sorry, into the utilities grid. And you know, we've been thinking about like a micro grant, like a smaller sort of micro grant. Like what is it, like a 10,000 or below is usually what I hear about for a micro grant. So like, what is it that that could buy? Like, what is it that that could support, I guess, in terms of like bridging the gap between like that utility piece, maybe getting some more metrics and or like specificity in the tariff, And then also like on the other side, helping tribes and local governments think about how a microgrid should be designed, and the conversation with the utilities sort of like actually make it happen and get constructed. Anyway, a lot on the performance-based rate making, and I think if there are ideas like maybe in the comment portal on like what exactly those like I guess the phrase is sort of like what exactly is the metric, like what is the target there that the utility should be going towards, and then and should there be a financial incentive, or just sort of like openness of that information is like maybe another sort of incentive. But a financial incentive would be maybe like a penalty or some sort of like share of earning. That would be like a more of like a financial incentive way. So those are like the sort of three components of what maybe some details could help. I don't know, is that what you were looking for, Lauren?
Love it.
Okay.
I have a quick question, very logistical, not pulling us out of this conversation for a minute, but I don't know for my other colleagues in this group, but I haven't really until today started thinking in earnest about this, and comments are due a week from tomorrow. And that doesn't feel realistic to me in terms of like my ability to pull comments, and to the extent that we do any coordination, do that. Would it be possible for us to submit comments later than that? And if so, what's the latest that would work?
Yeah, Sylvia, thanks for that question. I'm going to turn this one over to Edith to chat about, and it may be something that we need to think about and then come back to you with a more full answer. But Edith, is there anything you want to say here?
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. I appreciate the comment. I think Lauren's right. I think we need to come back to you to see what we can do. We've just worked on mapping out kind of a timeline to get us to where we need to be to get draft recommendations out. There will be a comment period once we get those kind of written draft recommendations out, and the timing for that is about mid-June, and there'll be a longer comment period for that. The way we were thinking of this comment period was really to address topics that we've talked about today, but we recognize there'll just be spillover because there won't be enough time to talk about everything. But I hear you on the need to in order to do that well, you might need more time. So I can't answer now because of it just requires a bit more of a conversation internally, but we'll take it on and circle back.
Thank you, Edith. And even if it's like a week, 3 days, something that carry us like typically, let's say if we write comments together, like I know, for example, NWIC folks are going to be out next week. I'm out one day next week. But typically we write comments together. Like we usually at least give each other like 24 to 48 hours for approvals, because many of our organizations require approvals. And so even if you could carry us like Thursday or Wednesday of the week after, that might be enough. And assuming that, like if you get most other comments, you can start reading those and still not get too much out of your timeline. You're not gonna be able to read them all on day one. But so anything will be helpful. Like, and unfortunately, I know we often, because there's many of these folks, right? Like we're like the one staffer, and some of my EJ partner organizations, like even have a staffer that's covering energy. It's just, we rely a lot on coordination, and then it's often we end up asking, for example, the PUC to give us extensions, like 2-3 day extensions where possible. So if you could consider something like that, that would be really helpful.
Thanks, Sylvia. We will take it on and we'll circle back. Thanks for elaborating too. I appreciate it.
I had one quick thing, Sylvia, to just build on what Edith said. To me, the way that I've understood the process, and I actually haven't seen Edith's latest timeline, but is that now is like the purpose of the working groups is sort of to surface, to try to get everything on the table. So if that helps at all, like in terms of like, it doesn't have to be perfect. There's going to be like another round of sort of refinement. To me, it's sort of like, I would hate to miss the opportunity to like get everything on the table as the team sort of looks at and has more comment and more sort of refinement over time. So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. Like when the draft recommendations come out for big public comment, like it's harder to add new stuff. It's easier to sort of comment on refinements at that point. Do you see what I mean?
I think I got you.
I'm gonna say, Sylvia, there's also two different parts happening here, right? Like, there's the draft policy actions, which those have the due date that you're speaking to. And then this part does not have the due date. This umbrella conversation is a different process. And so we have much more time to sort through this part of it.
That's really helpful. And still, if there's any flexibility on the draft policy actions, just based on the fact that we were barely able to touch on things, in 2 hours, I'm just guessing folks are going to have a lot of thoughts. And to the extent that we end up doing any joint comments, I don't know who here might be willing or interested in doing joint versus individual. Just a little bit. I'm not saying like a month. I'm not saying like 2 weeks. I'm saying, any amount of flexibility, because getting to something by Friday just feels really, to me personally, feels impossible right now.
It's short, yeah. And I think, there's other folks who are feeling the same way. I'm seeing Anahi also in the chat, because there's lobby days coming up. So I hear you. I'm gonna move us on to slide 46. And again, I don't know if we're gonna be able to get to all of these today, but this is one that I wanted to bring up because we haven't shown you this big heading or issue statement before. We kind of noticed a little bit of a gap in the conversation. It's come up occasionally. It's around kind of land use considerations. And a lot of these stickies fell into the uncategorized space. So we want to acknowledge that there's this balance in ecosystems, which includes humans, land, animals, and broadly, nature, I'm using air quotes. And we're asking ourselves, is there a consideration, issue, burden, benefit, or strategy that we need to address that values ecology all on its own? A non-human system on their own? Should we always consider the other? How do we acknowledge that when developing energy policies? Mary and I have been asking ourselves a lot of questions about this, and we took into account what we saw and heard, and we kind of came up with a proposed issue statement and strategies. And I'd love to get some feedback on this. The issue statement is the way that we currently evaluate benefits and burdens in our energy systems does not include enough consideration of how ecosystems interact and intersect between land, animals, nature, and environmental justice communities. And a proposed strategy is a just and sustainable energy transition requires carefully balancing energy needs like access to affordable energy and economic opportunity with the needs of ecosystems. This means making inclusive decisions that not only minimize harm to both communities and nature, but also ensure that environmental burdens and benefits are distributed equitably without disproportionately impacting marginalized groups. I'm curious where this one lands for folks. Thanks, Jess. I see your comment. Please feel free always to come off mute if you want to add anything.
Yeah, this is Jess. I'll add a bit to that I think something we're experiencing even in this legislative session is we have these clean energy goals, but within that, there is not an added layer of protection for existing systems, including ecosystems that protect our current carbon sinks, whether that be forests, eelgrass beds, estuaries, etc. And so things like funding for dredging in the Coos Bay estuary is a really great example of something that would actually harm our climate goals, but is not protected under HB 2021, for example, as that's an ecosystem that's holding immense amounts of pollutants and carbon trapped in sediments that would cause a lot of other damage to cultural and ecological resources. So I think that's one place that feels necessary. And it makes me think also about some of the other policy actions and how protections for critical ecosystems that affect frontline community resilience can be built into things like energy generation policy, and some of the other areas we've been talking about.
Thanks, Jess. And so maybe then too, like kind of thinking about this other like big heading that we're bringing to the table as you all are thinking about the comments that you want to add to the other draft policy actions. This is something to bring into consideration as well. I think I heard somebody else starting to come off of mute, but I didn't catch who it was.
Yeah, that was me, Lauren. And you guys are really hitting on a critical issue that we struggle with, and that's that it's easy to measure things downstream, things that are occurring within communities, you know, particularly in identifying environmental justice communities. It's much harder to capture those things that are happening upstream, where, you know, you might, like Odo might, you know, green light something that has tremendous environmental benefits, but it's really hard to track, you know, or to measure what those benefits are to communities. So this one's going to be extremely challenging, but it's such an important piece to be able to capture that. And I hope eventually we're able to follow your guys' lead and be able to do this as well. But I'm really glad to see this strategy in here.
Thanks, Eric. Are there any other thoughts on this one? I know we're coming very close to the end of our time. Mark, I see your note in this consideration as we move through the federal pressure that's coming up. Okay, I'm gonna note that there were a couple other, I sent y'all the slide deck. It's also, again, it's on the website. You know, we've gone through this process a little bit, and so I'm hoping it feels comfortable and like something that you're able to do kind of maybe on your own or with your colleagues, to look through the big heading, the issue statement, and the proposed strategy, and think about ways that I guess think about, are they broad enough? Are they specific enough? Thanks, Zach. What are we missing? What should be included in thinking about this work? So I'm sorry again that we're not able to get to all of them today in our conversation. Edith, I'm gonna have you move to slide 51, that one. Thanks, Sylvia, I see your question. So the other thing I'd love to know is if you think that we've missed any of the big headings. This is, you know, this is not a closed door. So if there's something else that you think needs to be considered that we haven't, please also add that to your comments. And for this particular portion, I don't have a full timeline written out yet. I'm thinking it's going to be a couple weeks, because part of it is also that Mary and I need to kind of get our next piece together and send it to you so you have the full picture to read through and think about. And I don't want it to butt up too much with the policy action comment period. So maybe after I hear from Edith that we have that timeline, then I can move this timeline. So it's I don't want it to be burdensome or cumbersome with the rest of the pieces. So I'll get back to you, Sylvia, in my follow-up email with everyone. We can go to the next slide. I'm going to roll through these so fast. I know if people have to go because we're at that 12 o'clock hour, totally okay for you to go. This information is all in the slides that I sent to y'all. So just very quickly, the next time we meet together will be a plenary session with all of the working groups, and we're going to report back on what we heard from you and the other working groups over the past several months. We're going to work to kind of stitch together the many overlapping and interrelated areas of discussions, and our recommendations are still going to be in the draft stage. And then during that last meeting, we'll also have some time for some clarifying questions. And to provide any final comments, again, right now, the date is May 9th. If you want them considered for that May 21st meeting, but we'll get back to you, like Edith said, on that piece. That's on May 21st, the plenary. This afternoon, we've got developing clean electricity and low carbon fuels happening from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. On May 7th is the building electrification, efficiency, and distributed energy resources meeting from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And then Edith, you can go to the next slide. And again, like this is my big final plug for the additional comments. To use that comment portal, chat with your colleagues or your the communities that you work with to hear if there's other issues that we need. And I know Zach was asking earlier, you know, is there an opportunity to say, hey, you missed this thing? Yeah, we would love to hear if you think we missed something. So here's just some of the questions that maybe you roll through while you are writing up your comments. And then we can go to the next slide. That's our comment portal. If I haven't said it 20 times today, please use the comment portal. And then that is it. Jess is asking, will there be additional comment deadlines coming up in the energy strategy process? There will be. There's going to be, you know, once we get the draft out, there'll be another comment opportunity. And so I'll get all of those deadlines together as best I can, and I'll send that timeline out to y'all in my next email so that you can see the full picture of when and where that will all be happening. And I think that's it. I know we're over. I'm so sorry. And again, thank you all so much for being here today. And I know this is a really long meeting. You all provided so much information the whole time. I'm really, really appreciative. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your Wednesday and get some time to relax for a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Grateful for all the work everyone's putting in.
Bye, Caleb.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, Greer.